Hi, everybody. It's me, the Fetch, host of Inside the Eye Live. Before the Sunday mainstream media political pundit talk shows, there is Inside the Eye Live, where we break down some of the weekly mainstream media talking points before the talking points even get aired. Add in some entertaining stories, weather, cats, intriguing and informative guests, and you get one of the most listened to Saturday morning streaming media political talk shows going today. And it's all right here on our flagship station, Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. So join me, the Fetch, for Inside the Eye Live every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern. It is truly intelligent media for the politically aware.
Welcome to Sacred Matrix, a divine paradigm of love and universal consciousness, with your host, Janet Kira Lesson and Dr. Sasha Lesson.
Together, we transform the world.
And now, here are your hosts, Janet Kira and Dr. Sasha Lesson.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. And I'm your host, Janet Kira Lesson, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Lesson. And today we are interviewing our special guests, Bob Mitchell and Jason Quitt. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about Bob first, and then Jason, and a little bit about their book. One moment while I scroll down. Bob Mitchell is a Canadian author and journalist who covered crime and sports for the Toronto Star for more than 35 years. He is the author of 7 books, including 3 UFO books. His first UFO book, Incident at Pleasant Ridge, a Canadian UFO mystery, was published in 2014. His second book is Intrusion, Alien Encounters, was published in 2015. And his latest book, What If? Close Encounters of the Unusual Kind, was released in November 2015. And we will be talking to Bob about the What If Close Encounters of the Unusual Kind book, May 1st, I believe it is. And let's see, he's an executive with MUFON Canada, and he's got a lot more information. Let me scroll down. He's been on numerous radio and television programs talking about his UFO books, and he's spoken at numerous conferences and events. And he spoke at the Alien Cosmic Expo last year, and he will be there again this year, and that's in June. And we'll tell you a little bit more about that later. And I'm going to tell you about Jason. Hold on. Jason is a graduate of the Institute of Energy Wellness and a student of Algonquin shamanism. Jason has been training and working with many teachers, shamans, and traditional healers from around the world. He is the author and teacher of Egyptian Postures of Power and the Yosef Codes, Methods of Personal Healing and Practice. As a channeler of universal and dimensional energies of healing, Jason combines these methods and modalities of energy medicine, shamanism, and dowsing to assist those on their own personal paths of healing and enlightenment. And a little bit about today's topic, which is the book, which is called Forbidden Knowledge, Revelations of a Multidimensional Time Traveler. And that was released March of 2016. The authors are Bob Mitchell and Jason Quitt. As a multidimensional time traveler, Jason Quitt has experienced the past, the present, and the future. From ancient Egypt and Atlantis to our possible pre- and post-apocalyptic future, he has been a witness to our unrecorded history. Within the pages of Forbidden Knowledge, you will learn who we are and how mainstream archaeologists, scientists, and historians have been swept up in a fabricated storyline. Our world isn't what we think it is. It's a world once fought and protected by otherworldly and dimensional beings. An ascension process is taking place on our planet today that is awakening our consciousness to peer beyond the veils of our known reality. we are once again remembering our place in the universe as multidimensional beings who are having physical experiences on planet Earth. Dr. Lesson, what would you like to say before we bring on Jason and Bob?
We of the Timothy Leary Stangroff generation do know that the doors of perception can be cleansed in many ways, and that people who are able to look past the materialist world to actually feel the holographic resonances within them of the particular relevant Akashic records are become our conduits for the information of the extraterrestrials who are aiding us in this ascension process. So I'm quite pleased to have Jason and Bob, because we're going to learn a lot more about where things are going and the positive side of things.
So welcome to our show, Bob and Jason. I guess we'll start with Bob first, and age before beauty, I guess, huh? Anyway, if you want to start and tell us a little bit about your project here.
Well, yes. Well, we're delighted.
I think you're both beautiful people, by the way.
Thank you.
That was just a joke.
I know. Well, I mean, we're both delighted to be on your show. You've caught us at a really good time because our book, which is co-written by myself and Jason, as you said, came out on March 23rd, and almost, I would say, since the very first day it got on Amazon, it's been #1 on the Amazon UFO category on Kindle.
Wow.
We've been alternating between #1 and #2 with other books, but essentially, I think all of this past week and most of last week we've been #1. And just before I came on, I checked again, and we're still #1. So it's been a very exciting time for us. And I must tell you, Jason told me that it would be. I didn't really believe him at the time, but he said we were tapping into something that people are just waking up to in the world right now, and the cover itself would draw people in, and it certainly has. And I couldn't be more pleased. And maybe Jason wants to give.
Do you think the cover?
What's on the cover?
Yeah, it's right here, honey. Do you think the cover is the main reason it's #1? I was getting a hit.
Say what it looks like.
Here, it's right here. Well, you'll have to go to aquariumradio.com and take a look at it. But it has a very kind of skinny ET on the cover with a pyramid and a king, ancient king, pharaoh, and lots of beautiful kind of lights behind it. And
it is beautiful.
It's very beautiful. Who designed the cover?
Jason did, and he has an interesting story where the idea came from. If maybe he might want to jump in right now and tell a little bit about that.
Sure.
Okay.
I was actually just racking my brain and saying, the book is called Forbidden Knowledge. What could be on this cover? And I grabbed one of my crystals, and I just started to do a meditation, and I was actually falling asleep. So this was before I went to sleep. And as I was dozing off, I get this really strong image of this being showing me the sacred geometry light in his hand. And the image was just burnt into my brain. And the next morning I ran down to the computer and I tried to put it all together, and it actually came out basically identical to what I saw.
So it's a real fourth dimensional vision that he saw of a being that has visited him. And for your listeners, Jason is when I say he's a multidimensional time traveler, his time traveling happens in the astral world. It's not a physical thing for him. It's an astral world traveling, and he will tell you later on about what time travel is and what it isn't, and how his world has completely changed since he began doing this at really in his early 20s, where the pivotal moment happened.
So what was the pivotal moment? What's that all about?
Before you go there, I want to just comment. I had a vision in February of first major contact, And the beings look very similar to what you have depicted here, except I saw the face, and the face was a mix of simian, mantis, and gray type features, even insectoid. It was a very interesting face, and your face is kind of nondescript here, but the torso comes down like that V, and even the head shape comes down to a point, and the very long, thin arms, and I imagine the legs are thin and extreme. And I was thinking, well, that's like an impossible creature. How does it walk? But it's probably because it's not really a 3D being. It's a higher dimensional being.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
fascinating.
Yeah, I get it's a higher dimensional being, and I feel like when you look at it, you see the different life streams that you live. So it's interesting that you say that you started to see all these different ETs within it.
Mm-hmm. It was a vision of I won't go into my vision because it's about you guys, but
well, we can interview
you. Yeah, we'll go back for it. Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I interrupted your question. We'll go back to it later. So, go ahead, continue. How you?
Oh yeah, the moment of transition.
Okay, there you go.
You got zapped and you transcended materialism.
This started to happen with an experience called sleep paralysis. And if your listeners are not aware of what sleep paralysis is, basically you wake up in the middle of the night, completely awake, but your body is still asleep and frozen. So it's almost like you're in a coma where you're screaming in your mind to wake up or to move a finger. So it's not a fun place to be. And as this started to happen to me, I started to notice that things were in my room with me. So I felt like I was not alone. And as this was happening night after night after night, I can feel and sense that there are beings just walking around the room while I was in this state. So this started to really get me upset and angry because I didn't know what was happening to me. And one night, I just had enough of it, and I was violently trying to shake myself awake from the experience, and I shook myself so hard that I popped myself out of my own body. And I rose up out of my bed, and I could physically see myself lying there. And at the foot of my bed was a very tall being, and it looked like it was a cloaked being wearing a robe. It looked like almost like a grim reaper, very tall. The head was almost touching the ceiling. And at that moment, I knew that this was not a dream. That this was something.
So your anger is what motivated you to break out of the dream.
Oh yes, I was so pissed off that this was happening to me, and I just wanted it to stop, because it was almost like it was an intrusion in my life. It was an intrusion in my sleep cycle, and it was happening almost every single night to me. So I just wanted it to stop. And I was just really angry and trying to focus myself to wake up. And I just violently shook myself so hard that it popped me out of my body. But when I saw this, and I knew that this was not a dream, that I was physically outside my body, it scared me so much that I went right back into my body and woke up. Mm-hmm. But ever since that pivotal moment, all the sleep paralysis stopped, but it opened a door for me. And I was extremely curious about what was on that other side. So at nighttime, I would go to sleep, and I think the curiosity got the best of me, because I would actually purposely put myself into sleep paralysis. So it's almost like I learned how to go to sleep, but keep my mind awake and put my body to sleep. It was almost like a hypnosis. And when I would fall into these states, then I would just kind of shake myself out, pop out of my body, and have new experiences that I've never had before. So that's kind of how this all started.
So you got this little routine. It was like a key to the doorway that you learned how to do there and how to go back there.
That's right.
As an act of will. Wow.
And, a lot of people ask, you got out of your body and you saw something like a Grim Reaper, why would you ever try to go and do this again? And you know what? It was just such a curiosity factor, because right at that moment you realize there's more to life than we know. There's something outside of us that's very real, and I was given almost the key to access it. So now I was very curious, and I was purposely trying to do what I did before.
Now that you're more practiced or mature with the whole thing, what kind of energy do you feel coming from this? You characterized this green as Reaper, but now what do you look at that being as? What kind of vibes do you get from it?
As a teacher.
Teacher.
And the fear that I felt was my own fear, and I projected it on that being.
Mm-hmm.
And what I learned was...
Do you know what it looked like?
No,
do you remember what it looked
really
like?
just looked like a big shadow.
Mm-hmm.
There's no facial features or any detail. You can just tell that it was cloaked like a Grim Reaper. And it didn't speak to me. There was no communication. It was almost just... I felt like it was putting me in this state so that I could free myself from what it was doing. So it was almost like showing me how I have to do this and go down this road.
And it's interesting that his first impression was fear, because it's dark black mass, and I think we're all preconditioned to experience when something like that happens. I have talked to some people since we've written the book, and they have had sleep paralysis and have actually sensed or even seen a black mass in their room. And so I tell them that, I know it's hard for them to understand it, but I try to get them not to be afraid that this is possibly an entity from another dimension trying to help you, like he was helping Jason figure out how to leave your body and experience another dimension. So I think that it's interesting that, it's a black mass. We think fear, but really that fear comes with us.
And for me, after a while, I looked at every situation as a test. And I would say the vision of these beings is also a test to see how we will react towards what is being presented. Mm-hmm. So if we come into this astral world with a lot of fear and anxiety, it's just amplified. And it will affect our journey greatly. So it's almost like we have to almost be very present and peaceful in no matter what circumstances.
Yeah. And that probably takes a lot of practice, because
it takes
the average person would not feel peace, I'm sure, if it happens to them.
Yeah. And
it's like the law of attraction in action. Whatever you're feeling, you pull to you. So you have to get control of your energy, so you create what you desire rather than what you fear.
Yes. And I'll tell you, after the first 100 times, it's very shocking and fearful. But then after that, it's almost like you get so used to the experience that it just becomes like a normal day occurrence.
And Jason,
so underneath what you feared is what you wanted. You wanted the contact.
Yes. Yes.
And Jason has explained it to me that when you're in this other world, the astral world, he said it almost seems more real than the third dimensional world that we live in. I've never been able to get into the astral world, so I can't even comprehend what he means by that. But I think people who have experienced it will probably say the exact same thing.
Oh yeah, I've been to the astral world, so I know what you're talking about, and I've seen the Grim Reaper person, and I was afraid when I was a child, very afraid. But as I did work on it, I had hypnosis and, reflection and therapy. I finally got that he was just trying to communicate with me. He was a guide. He was a teacher.
That's right.
Coming to the same conclusions.
Yes, and like I say, images can be deceiving, and it's part of the test, and it's part of growing up consciously in that world so you can navigate it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so once I started to leave my body, at first it was almost like I was just playing around and just exploring. So I'd kind of, just float around my room, check out different objects that were in the room. Sometimes I'd venture around the house or move outside. And eventually I started to have contact. And at first this contact was, I don't want to say violent, but it was very abrupt. So basically I would be sleeping at night, and almost immediately I'd just be yanked out of my body by a being or two, and they wouldn't talk to me or communicate with me, and in fact I didn't even see them. They just kind of looked like outlines of a being, and they would shoot me up into outer space, and I could see the planet, and we would be turned around and directed back to the Earth at different points, and they would drop me off in these points, and they would just leave me there, and I'd almost be like a witness or an observer to certain events. And,
like what? Where did they drop you? What was happening?
Well, the first one they ever took me to, they dropped me somewhere in the United States, and the Earth was completely scorched, like burnt, and the sky was very red. It almost looked like it was burnt as well. And it was just a desolate landscape. There was no life, no trees. Everything was just, it looked like it was just decimated. And then what they did is they pulled my consciousness down into the ground, and they took me into a man-made bunker. And it looked like, someone that just built it themselves. And it looked like the person that was in there, they were suffering greatly. So whatever happened, this protection that this person made wasn't helping them.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the first thing that they took me to. And they never gave me any times or anything. I had no communication. It was almost like just dropping me off and allowing me to observe.
Oh, so what do you make of that experience? What does that teach you, or what's that about?
Well, I had no idea. I had no footing. At this time, I had no real religious or spiritual upbringing. I didn't know what was happening to me. I was just kind of going with the flow of the experience. And my first thought was, they're taking me to the future. Like that's really what I thought was, and the only way I can describe it was astral time travel. So they can take you out of your body and then put you into a different timeline. And you just kind of get dropped off, and you get to observe the situation at hand. And many of these experiences were quite horrific and frightening. And
what are some of the other ones that you had?
So this was like a future.
Well, future, but it could be the past.
Yeah.
We have stories of the apocalypse coming through several times.
The past, the future shall be.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
Anyway, describe some of the other incidences that you might get a pattern.
Sure. The next one, and there definitely was a pattern, which I found very interesting. The next one, they took me to a prison camp for children. And it was an open field, and there was very tall cement walls with barbed wire. And in this big field, there were hundreds of children between the ages of, I would say, 5 and 13. And they weren't wearing any uniforms. They were just wearing everyday clothes. And the reason I'm thinking this is the future is because it looked like there was a tank there. There were soldiers there. So for me, that wasn't like a past thing. And I was trying to figure out what these children were wearing, and it didn't look like World War II. It didn't look like anything from the past. So I had to kind of think in my mind again that this is something in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And that was
what did the tanks look like? Did they look like modern tanks?
Yeah, they looked like modern tanks, like the real advanced tanks.
Oh,
I don't really know the differences between a lot of tanks, but I'm pretty sure that these were modern tanks. And it was a very violent scene that I witnessed. So when I came back from this experience, I didn't even know how to express to people what had happened to me, because I was white as a ghost. I can barely talk to people, and I was basically shaking for a couple days. I think I had like post-traumatic stress from being there.
And what Jason hasn't explained is that when he is in these scenarios, even though he's not physically there and he's just observing, he can feel and sense and hear everything that's going around him. And in that prison camp, what he saw and heard was the screams of these children, because they were being shot by the cannon, and they were also being run over by the people on the tanks. And so he actually experienced this horrific event, and that really affected him when he came back. So, and the sky, I think he was telling me that the sky was burnt like it was in that other scenario. So it's almost like, even though it's in the future, he's going back a little bit before the one that happened originally. It's still in the future, but he felt that it wasn't too long in the future. Like, we're not talking like 30, 40 years later. It was more recent times.
Wow.
Right.
Because of the tank. I think that really,
yeah.
You would expect 100 years from now that tanks might look a lot different, but this one didn't.
And you have to remember, I never asked for any of this to happen to me. And I wasn't a meditator or even into the subject of any of these things. I felt like I was just a normal person that suddenly got thrown into this world. And I was actually like begging for it to stop. Like, I really didn't like this new ability that came to me, because it was quite intense. I mean,
so you felt all these children being murdered.
That's right.
And how did you handle that intense experience?
Not well. Not well. And just to correct Bob, the tank wasn't shooting. In fact, it seemed like they didn't want to waste any bullets. So
yes.
They were just running kids over and stuff. But when I came back, like I swear, it's like I would try to speak to somebody, even if it was a normal conversation, and nothing would come out of my mouth. It was like I was so choked up from the experience that I just couldn't deal with the normal world. And it took about a week for me to be normal again. So it was a quite traumatic experience.
Oh, yeah.
So did they take you to something more positive, or did you keep seeing dark imagery?
Well, this is the
happened
thing
next?
that well they didn't stop, and they took me to a couple more, which was almost like I didn't get to actually see a visual. Everything was dark, and it was almost like the earth shook very violently, and it was like the loudest explosion I've ever heard. So when I came back, I actually thought that I was deaf, because the explosion was so loud that I for sure thought I lost my hearing. It was that powerful. And another one was I saw like a tidal wave, very, very tall tidal wave, bigger than most buildings, so it was very unique. And that just came crushing over the place. But anyways, I kept asking and begging, please stop taking me. I don't want this anymore. I don't want to see these things, because it really messes your life up, because it's almost like you're living in the real world, and then suddenly something's coming along and saying, no, that's not the world you need to know. This is the world we need to show you. So it was quite a drastic change in my life. But after they stopped taking me. And after those first visions or journeys, whenever a being would come to me in the middle of the night, they would start to communicate with me now. And everything that they were saying to me was basically one thing. Jason, you need to heal yourself. And then that became the message for years after these experiences. So every time I came in contact with one of these beings, all they wanted to do was try to help me to heal. And
what was your problem? What did you need to be healed of? What was your physical ailment or
exactly? I did not know, and I thought, like, my whole life I had terrible stomach issues. Like, I really couldn't eat anything; it would just make me feel very sick, and I was very skinny. I didn't have good sleeping patterns, so I would say I was not healthy as a person. There's something definitely wrong with me. And when they told me I need to be healed, I thought that there was something seriously wrong with me. So I went to the doctors and, I did every test I possibly could. And everything came back, with flying colors. Jason, you're great. You're healthier than most. So I realized that physical healing or normal medicine wasn't my answer. And they turned me on to a thing called Qigong.
Oh, yeah.
And Qigong it's like the Chinese martial arts of healing, or energy postures. And I started to learn Qigong and practice it. And it took me about a year of practicing Qigong where I could physically, in the third dimensional world, start to experience energy. So even though I was having crazy outer body experiences and having contact with different beings, when I would come back to the physical world, I was very numb. I was very cut off. And I didn't feel or know anything. And it basically took me a whole year of practicing every day until I could finally experience the energy world while I'm in my physical body. And that actually started the healing process. That's what they were talking about. I had to heal my karma. I had to heal my energy body. I had to heal the wounds that I've been carrying. And until then, I wouldn't progress in this world or the other world.
So you had to heal yourself, and how were you supposed to heal your own self? Did they give you a clue?
Well, they did, and it was almost like as I practiced, I started to get more information, and it would change the way I would do healing. For example, I went to a health show one year, and there was a gentleman selling these things called Pharaoh cylinders. And they're just a piece of stones. One is a shungite, which is a black carbon, and the other is a soapstone. And when I held these rods, I started to feel heat and energy start to build in my solar plexus area. And I knew that feeling well. When I practiced Qigong for like a half an hour, I kind of feel that heat in my stomach. But just by holding these rods, I felt that energy. So I bought them and I took them home and started to practice with them. And when I started to do this, I started to get tremendous pain in my body. I would have pain in different areas. And what I would do is I would move these cylinders around with my arms until the energy went to a specific point on my body where I experienced the pain. And when I would hit the pain, I would stop the posture and hold it. And the energy will build up underneath the pain, and it almost like pushed it out of my body and dropped it to the floor. So I started to become my own energy healer using these rods where I can feel the energy is not right in my body, and using these postures I can push the energy out of my body. And
Wow.
and then something changed in my journeys. So I'd go to sleep at night and I'd be transported into the past. And I'd be transported to an Egyptian temple, and I'd be standing in front of what looked like a pharaoh, and they would be standing in different postures. There was no communication. All I did was copy what this pharaoh was doing. So if the pharaoh was standing in a particular way, I would just stand in front and copy him exactly. And when I would do this, it felt like something would open up over my head, and it was almost like a waterfall of hot energy going through every cell of my body. And this vibration, this energy was so potent and powerful that I would actually physically wake up in my bedroom in these postures, still vibrating in the bed. And once I would break the posture, the energy would be cut off. And I'd be like, wow, like, this is amazing. It's almost like I was set on this healing path, and as I'm going, it's like I'm being taught everything that I need to do from my journeys. So this didn't occur just once, this occurred multiple times, and I would record what they showed me or what I did. And that actually started my book, my first book, which is called Egyptian Postures of Power, Ancient Qigong System, because once I practiced that for quite a while, I was given a clear message that, I've gotten to a certain level of my own healing where I can now share this information with others.
Is this a sequence?
Yes.
Does one follow the other in a pattern?
That's correct. That's correct. And what they've showed me is that what Qigong is and what these postures are is that every time you enter a posture, you're changing the way the energy flows through the body, but you're also building and strengthening an energetic field around your body. So by doing it in a specific order, what you're doing is you're rebuilding your energetic bodies. And as you're rebuilding your energetic bodies, you're clearing out the past, you're clearing the wounds, you're clearing the karma, you're clearing what you're carrying, and you're strengthening your fields so that you can be protected. Many people, they wear amulets or crystals or just things that they'll say, okay, well, this is going to protect my energy. And I tell everybody there's nothing that's going to protect you but you. And you have to learn how to build yourself up so that when anything comes into you, you have the tools, and your tools are just your consciousness. And your consciousness is your energy. And just by using yourself, like if there's an energy that comes into my field, I feel it immediately. But just by using my consciousness, I can work it right out immediately. But it takes time to build your energy up to that level where you have that communication and control. But like I said, there's no such thing as protection. The only protection you have is yourself. You have to build yourself up.
And maybe, Jason, you can go into...
I observed that there's so much like the same system that we use in all chakra tantra, where you look at which level of consciousness you're vibrating with other people, and if you want to, you can imagine a sequoias or a metal shield or energy field in front of you, or you can push another person's energy back in your energy field. These are different words, but the system you're explaining is so familiar.
That's right.
Go ahead, Bob.
I was just going to say that this also led Jason to a more deeper understanding of ancient Egypt and and who was teaching him these things. Maybe he can explain that a little bit.
Sure. So after I started to learn these postures, I started to get visitations by another person, and this person said their name was Thoth. Mm-hmm. And so this is, back then I'm learning as I'm going, right? I didn't really know these things. Mm-hmm. Now I think it's obvious. People know who these characters are. But for me, it was just like a learning experience. I didn't know any of this. And so this being Thoth would take me, and one night he took me to a temple, and we went to this sarcophagus. And the sarcophagus was opened, and there was a person inside. And when I looked in, immediately the first thought that came into my mind was, I'm looking at Osiris. But it wasn't the way he's depicted in the books. The way I saw him, or the way he was presented to me, was he had a bull's head. So it was like a physical human body, and it was a bull's head. And it wasn't a mask, it was literally a bull's head on a human body.
Wow.
The only strange, or if that's not strange enough, but his legs were cut off from the knees down. And I still have no explanation for that. No one has explained that to me yet. But I always thought that was a very strange detail, that he had no legs under his knees. But anyways, Thoth did some type of a ceremony where he was taking the jewelry off of Osiris, and he was placing it on me. And it was a very powerful ceremony. And after that, I'm just trying to remember all the details here. And after that, he took me again to a storehouse. And this storehouse, it was almost like it had... Oh yeah, so let me back up one more. Before he went to the storehouse, he came to me one night and he handed me this cylinder. It was like this metallic cylinder. And he said to open it. So I unscrewed the top and opened it. And it was almost like it was a sound that came out of it. And what the sound sounded like was, sounded like a million-person choir. And they were almost saying a mantra or a tone. And it was such a powerful sound that it almost felt like every cell in my body, or every DNA in my body, just opened up and got cracked. It was such a powerful experience it wasn't just to hear the sound, but to feel the sound go through every part of my body. And I actually woke up from that experience like literally shaking and just bawling my eyes out, crying, like I had no control over my emotions. Because it was
toned and tuned.
It just opened.
It toned you up, yeah.
And then after that, he took me to this storehouse where there was all these scrolls, and he just started to hand me all these scrolls and papers, and he basically said, now that you've gone through this trial or initiation, I am now initiated or reauthorized as a pharaoh again, and I hold the energies and history of Egypt within me. So it's funny, I never told anybody these things ever. I've never told people these things, and it was only recently, with the help of Bob, that I've just said, okay, fine, I'll just be completely honest and tell these stories.
And Jake, like what we say in the book, and what your listeners need to understand, is that Jason, thought the world was absolutely the way most people think the world is, but through all these journeys and through all these experiences, he has realized that he has experienced many, many past lives that go far back into history that we don't even know really exists. And one of these past lives was he was basically alive at the time of ancient Egypt and when the pharaohs reigned, and and that he was a pharaoh back then, and he was actually reliving this past life in these journeys, and you know, and then he brings the knowledge back into this life here, because he basically is what he feels he is as an incarnated being on this planet from, you know, another solar system in this life, but he's experienced many lives on Earth as a human being, and many lives as another species elsewhere. It's all tied in together, and it's what makes the entire story so fascinating.
So the message is the structure of the universe and how things really are. Is that ultimately that's the meta message?
And that's what we're finding when we interview experiencers, and you know, we've worked with thousands of people through past life incarnations, and I have similar experiences where I know who I am as a goddess, and yet it's very humbling because you're still here. You know, you're Jason, and I'm Janet, and I'm just, you know, who do we think we are? But we are all of the above. So did you get a name of the pharaoh that was your name? Did you get an idea who you are?
Yes.
Or are?
I don't know if I should say it publicly though. I go back through a reliving I had as Akhenaten. And
Okay.
That's in the book. So I got to live some memories of being Akhenaten, and you know, it's hard to come out and say, you know, you are this person. And what I believe,
I have people that are saying they're Thoth. I have people that say they're Marduk. Right now there are so many people, and I've learned I don't judge anyone. I think what's happened when you were asked a question or something that was very Thoth-like, because he went to the halls of Amenti and the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, and he was an initiate, and there was an advanced race, and they said, now what will you choose to do as your work? And he had become enlightened. He was traveling through space and time like you were. Yeah. And he says, I'm here to help humanity wake it up and become conscious. So that is a similar response at the end of your initiation.
Yeah, a higher consciousness has sent their threads into many individuals that are all
Right, so that's what he said. He said he sent his consciousness down as a thrice-born hermit. So his body is in stasis in the halls of Amenti, but he sends, just like the movie Avatar, he sends his consciousness into human form or other life forms, and he's not limited to one. So
it's, you know, basically to be able to embrace both the humble and the prideful, which is your Thoth, and you're also Jason, and you know, Akhenaten, you're all of these, you know.
And you got to remember, that Jason didn't know any of this stuff. He really didn't know who Thoth was, or at the time, and so it wasn't like he was, you know, dreaming this stuff up. It just happened to him, and it was because of this strong connection to Akhenaten that something very seriously happened to him last May. That really goes to show that he's not making this thing up, folks. It's an actual event. Maybe Jason can tell that he doesn't like to talk about this, but we always have to, because it does show you the strength and the connection and the world he's living in.
I sent in May.
Yes, basically, and you know, I'll make it short. I don't need to tell the whole story, but basically what happened was I went through something called a reliving. And what a reliving is that for some reason, past energies, past life streams got pulled into my life stream here as Jason. So I started to actually relive the moments of death of Akhenaten in the physical life here of Jason. So I was manifesting what was actually happening to him, and it almost killed me here. So it was not a nice thing, and it is very hard to talk about, because I suffered greatly, and it wasn't just a one night thing. It was something that lasted about a month long. and basically I started to get these hives all over my body, and the life was sucked out of me, and I basically I lost 70% of my vision. I couldn't eat. I couldn't get out of bed, and I started to get all these open sores on my body. My face looked like I got beat up from a boxer. My ears were huge cauliflowers. My face was blown up huge. And if I looked in the mirror, it literally looked like something was eating me. I literally looked like a zombie. My eyes were blood red. And I went to every doctor I could and took every test, and basically they came back, this is a medical anomaly. They have no idea what's wrong with me because every test they do is absolutely perfect.
Wow. So lead to confluence.
Yeah, and what was it? Every day got worse. So every day was worse than the day before, and I was really going downhill fast. And I finally called a shaman by the name of Peter Bernard, and he did a healing on me. And he basically told me afterwards, it was very good that I called him when I did, because he couldn't see me making it another week in this condition. He said that this was very ancient sorcery, and we got into this whole past life thing, which was the death of Akhenaten, where he was poisoned by what we call dark shamans. They put him alive in a sarcophagus, and they put scarab beetles, hundreds of scarab beetles in the coffin, and they sealed it. So basically he was eaten to death. And when I looked in the mirror, that's exactly what I looked like. I literally looked like I was being eaten to death. And I laugh about it, but it was a horrific experience to go through.
So who were these dark energies? Were they agents of Ra, of Marduk?
No, they were, I would say they were part of the priesthood. It was
whose priesthood?
It was the old boys.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, it was the Anunnaki and stuff. But so basically what happened was, Akhenaten was supposed to be just a pawn. But when he came to power, he decided not to be a pawn.
Yeah.
And he just wanted to throw out the old boys, out the old religion, take the money, economics, power, and authority away from the church, or away from the priesthood.
Yeah.
And he did it. He basically bankrupted Egypt and threw everybody out, and took the roofs off the temples and said, now we'll pray to one God, which is the symbol of the sun disk, Aten, and through the sun, that's a representation of the divine, and it's all through self-empowerment of the self. Mm-hmm. So a total opposite message of the old priesthood. So it's like I still feel we're under the exact same system. I don't think anything's changed.
Yes.
And it's all about the money, wealth, economy, control, and power of these priesthoods and the societies that support them. And they're still in power. And, it's all about what happens to you when you try to change the paradigm. So Akhenaten tried to change the whole structure of governance, of priesthood, of religion, economy. He tried to really just turn it upside down.
Yeah.
And they erased him from history.
Right. So they left Amarna, his capital, just deserted there in the desert.
Yeah. And there's, and they always put up Tutankhamun, like that's the golden boy, the golden child, right? Mm-hmm. And it's a big pull for all the museums and things, but they keep saying that Akhenaten was Tutankhamun's father.
Right.
And
Is that not true?
It's completely not true.
Okay.
Akhenaten had 6 daughters. And they've actually found the mother of Tutankhamun, and they found the father of Tutankhamun, and they have successively taken the DNA and matched them to these 2 people who were brutally murdered in their early 20s. So, maybe we'll talk more about that after the break, but, there's serious history there that people don't know.
Mm-hmm. Fascinating.
And it's almost like we're continually programmed that Akhenaten was Tutankhamun's father, and that's why he was the pharaoh. But that's not the case.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an interesting...
Yeah. Well, we're on a break right now, so we'll be back in just 3 minutes. And then we'll continue this saga. Back soon. Aloha.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Tune in Tuesdays at 12 noon Eastern on Studio A to hear Tammy Adams share her knowledge of an unknown realm on Talking with Your Angels. Join Tammy as she uncovers hidden secrets about the spiritual world of angels, ghosts, and other entities that have been with us longer than we know. Tammy is a psychic, a teacher, spiritual coach, a leader in her field, and will be sharing her information and stories with you. So join us on Tuesdays at noon on Studio A. With Tammy's guidance, you'll find out who has been watching over you from the other side, and soon you will be talking with your angels.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Aloha, everyone, and welcome back to the Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. And I'm your host, Janet Kira Lesson, with Dr. Sasha Lesson, and our guests, Bob Mitchell and Jason Quitt. But before we get back to our show, I'd like to remind everybody to please go over to freedomslips.com and make your donation. $1, $5, $10, $15, $20, $100, whatever you can spare is greatly appreciated. And we do thank you very much for your donation. Dr. Lesson, what would you like to say?
We were talking a little bit about just what happened when basically Thoth's people were kicked out of Egypt, and just to give a little background of this from the perspective of the Anunnaki stuff, is that Marduk had arranged for Dumuzi, Inanna's fiancé, to be killed. So Inanna was chasing Ra through the pyramid, and they caught him and they sealed him up, and he was going to die. And Anu from Nibiru said, "No, you can't kill my grandson." So they let Marduk out, and after a while he was pardoned when Anu visited Earth again. And as soon as he was pardoned, he went back and went to war again against Ningishita, against Thoth. And after 300 years, Enki, their father, said, "That's enough. Ningishita, why don't you go build Stonehenge and maybe going over to Teotihuacan and start the Maya and stuff like that. I think we've had enough war in Egypt. So that's a little bit of background from my perspective.
So let's let Bob talk and then go back to Jason. So,
sure,
Bob, you're taking this story and what's your role in this story? How you got it out into a book form?
Well, it's quite interesting. Both of us were at last summer's Alien Cosmic Expo, and I at the time was giving a talk on my book Intrusion: Alien Encounters, and I didn't know Jason. I only knew of him through the organizer, Joanne Eady, who kept telling me that I have to meet this guy Jason. And she didn't actually tell me why I had to meet him. It just says that you'll really like him and get along with him. And so, it was in the back of my mind that during the show I'd go up and introduce myself. But so I'm sitting at my table during the show, and Stanton Friedman is beside me selling his books. And lo and behold, this 6'5" person comes up to the table and looks down on me, sitting there, and I'm looking up at him, and he's got this big smile on his face, and he's looking at the cover of that book, and on the cover was a mantis being, and it was a sketch drawn by one of the experiencers that I had interviewed, and he basically said that he knows who that is, and he's met that being, to me at the time, it was another validation that somebody else but the people that I interviewed actually had an experience with this being called a mantid. But I didn't think anything more about it, and I made it a point to go and listen to Jason's lecture, not really knowing what he was really going to talk about. I think I might have known that he was going to talk about something to do with ancient Egypt, but that was about all. And the first thing he said when he started giving his speech was that he came into this world with pre-birth memories, and that he had actually chosen his parents. And when he said that, it was a concept I had never heard before, and something clicked in my mind, and I said, I want to write a book about this guy. And then as I sat there and listening more, he started talking about ancient Egypt and the connection to the pharaohs and this Egyptian postures, and it just was all fascinating. And again, I said I got to write a book about this guy, but I really didn't know what the book was about, because at that point I had no concept or even any idea that he was a multidimensional time traveler. I just thought it was something to do with reincarnation and maybe some aliens involved, but didn't really know anything about it. And so we decided to get together. But again, I had no idea what direction this was going to take me. And maybe Jason can explain what happened after that part.
Yeah, sure.
And why he wanted to write a book too. So
right. Remember, just before the break, I said that I went through a reliving about death, and this whole time I was lying in bed, and I was just thinking, if I die, nobody's gonna know who I am. Nobody's gonna know my story. Oh. And that was kind of on my mind, because I had so much information that I just held, and I did not tell a soul. And then it was a month later, so it happened in May, and then in June I was there, and I just decided, okay, you know what? I need to write my own book. I need to write all this information down. I need to write my experiences, my journeys, and I have to be entirely truthful about my experience. So in my mind, I was already preparing myself to write a book. And then Bob Mitchell, the famous Bob Mitchell, 35-year crime writer from the Toronto Star and sports writer, says, I want to write a book about you. And I said, that's great, Bob. I have a big story to tell you. So it was definitely synchronicity, and it was definitely the universe pulling us together, because really I've held a lot of this in, and it took an experience of almost dying for me to finally decide, okay, I'm going to tell this story. And right when I decided it, Bob is right in front of me saying, I'm going to write your story.
And this was a story, as I said, I had no idea what the story was going to be. There was just something compelling me that I knew I had to write this story. And we decided that we'd get together later in the summer. Jason was getting married in August, so I said, well, let's do it after that. And around September, we had our first meeting, and we really didn't start writing this thing till about December. And within 2 to 3 months, we had this entire book done. And as Jason said, there were a lot of things he didn't want to bring out, but I kept urging him and pushing him to, if you're going to tell your story, you got to tell your story. You can't keep anything back. And much to his reluctance, he finally agreed that he would tell everything he could. And it was just sort of
what was feared? What was the problem with telling everything?
What
are you afraid of?
Well, I remember a lot of my past lives. Let's just put it that way. And I'll say a lot of the times that I've come forward, I've been taken out quite quickly. So there was a fear of it happening again. And I've been warned. I've actually been warned a couple times in this life. So for me, it was almost like I didn't care anymore. It was almost like I've had enough. And I think that if I got it out, then I wouldn't have these fears anymore. That
no more blackmail.
Yeah, no more. Like, just everything is out in the open now. It's public. Everybody knows my story. Everybody's talking about what I've been through, And I feel a lot better that I did it, but I have to say there's a lot of stuff in that book that I'm still not comfortable people knowing.
And a lot of the stuff, goes against what mainstream scientists and archaeologists have taught everybody for over the years. And Jason sort of talks about it from his own personal experiences. And what my role in this was to get him to come out of the shell, so to speak, and then try to find some background that sort of puts it all into context. Like I would write something, he would write it back to me, and I'd write it back to him, and we sort of shared ideas until we were satisfied of everything that the way it appeared. And Jason says that when you read this book, you're actually going on a healing journey yourself, and by the end of the book, you will have healed. And in a lot of ways, that is because I went on this journey with him. There were so many things in this book I never even knew about before, and it's not a book about just past lives and reincarnation. It's a book about aliens and the connection to our past and our future, and who controls what on this planet, and despite what mainstream archaeologists say that mankind's only been around for 6,000 years, there's quite a lot of evidence all over the world that suggests that there's been, several different civilizations on Earth. Absolutely. Dating back millions of years, and people just want to keep their heads in the sand and not think of anything logically. So we tried to, show that in the book, and there's a whole section about healing, and really, what I knew about aliens came from the people that I interviewed in my books, and they was their experiences, and every one of them had never told their story before until they told it to me too. So for some reason, people seem to want to open up to me, and I don't know why, but they do. And
well, it's a gift. You're just opening the portal for millions of people. The more that Jason talks about, Jason, that you just talk about, you think you're only talking about yourself and no one else. The more you're talking about every one of us and something we can vibrate with, and Bob is the artist that helped you bring this forth.
And I can tell you a little something that happened to us a couple of weeks ago that really brought things home to me is that part of this book talks about the power of crystals and the healing stones and like Jason has one of the, I guess I can say one of the world's nicest private collection of crystals around, and he's got some of the rarest stuff that you've ever seen, and but people were coming up to our booth and at the Toronto Health Show where he was selling his crystals and we were also selling our book, and they were holding these crystals in their hands and they were closing their eyes, and it almost was as if they were having this like out of body religious experience. You could just see it in their eyes that the energy was flowing around them and they were all feeling something. And I'm standing there looking at this and I can't experience what they're experiencing, but I'm kind of getting a little envious because it almost looks like they're really enjoying the power of these crystals. But I don't know what it is they're enjoying. And there's little kids coming up to the booth and getting their parents to buy these crystals. And I'm thinking, this is such a weird thing that's happening, because when I was that age, I was getting my dad, going up to a hockey card booth and buying hockey cards, yet these parents are buying crystals for these kids. And they're all telling little stories about how the crystals make them feel nice when they hold them and all this. And this is a world that I, have really no knowledge to. I wrote about it in the book based on what Jason was telling me, but I never experienced it. And so at some point, Jason gave me a meteorolite crystal to hold in my hand, and it fit in the palm of my hand. It wasn't big. It certainly didn't weigh much. And him and another healer there named Lorman, they said, hold your hands out right, and breathe in through your left hand and breathe out through your right hand. And I did this for several times, and nothing. I felt absolutely nothing, and I said, well, I don't know what these people are feeling, but I'm certainly not feeling it. And to me, a crystal was some kind of decoration, and the only rock I had growing up was a pet rock. So there was nothing to do it. So I'm standing there, and a couple hours later, I started to get this intense pain in my left arm. And it wasn't the kind of pain, people say you're going to have a heart attack, you're going to have a pain in your arm. It wasn't that pain. It was almost like a strain, like I had picked up like a heavy rock and had tore all the muscles in my arm. And by the end of that Saturday night, I could barely lift my arm above my waist, my left arm. And driving home, I actually had to use my right hand to operate the turn signal on the steering wheel. It was that much painful. And the next day we had the show still on the Sunday, and again the pain just was awful, and I literally couldn't lift it above my chest or just above my I couldn't lift it above my shoulder, and I could barely lift my arm up to sign the autograph the books. And Jason explained to me that when you undergo these energy transfers or energy healing, that there is a lot of pain associated. I think he spoke about that earlier when he was using the cylinders, that there was this immense pain, and my rational mind couldn't explain where this pain came from. And a couple of days went by, and the pain then just completely vanished. So I experienced something that I can't explain, but it was definitely from the power of these crystals, because I didn't lift anything heavier than my book the whole weekend. So it was interesting to say the least. So now I guess I'm awakening.
But you have to also say that all different people started to come into the booth with their own stories to tell you.
Yeah, they were a lot of them had Jason's Egyptian postures of power, and one lady who was probably in her mid-20s said that she had been deaf all her life, and after doing this for about 6 months, her hearing came back into her ears again. So it was just amazing.
The one that you had in your hand, the one that before your arm got heavy like that. If you were to voice that consciousness or whatever is being communicated from that stone to Bob, what are you communicating to Bob as that stone?
I don't know. I didn't. didn't sense any communication other than the fact that it was happening. You know, I have held that stone since. It's in my house now, and you know, the only thing I can say is that when I do hold the stone, I seem to have these very, very vivid and strange dreams at night, and but I don't remember them when I wake up, but I know I've had them.
Uh-huh. Okay, so one thing that we do get though is that the stone was communicating to you that
Yes.
phenomenon such as this huge heaviness and the transference of pain is a real phenomenon, and it was something that you got experientially. That was what.
Yeah, but I don't know. I don't know what happens next.
I think, and this is just from my own experience of going down this path, is that it's the awakening of the energy body. And because it's being awakened and energy is starting to move through it, it's almost like a muscle that we've never used before. So there is pain associated with it. And it would definitely feel like a muscle strain because we've never channeled or moved energy in those centers before. And if we have, not at the level that this crystal allowed to pass through.
Yeah.
So
this was a very strained. It was very muscly strained. It was. If I hadn't experienced it, I wouldn't have believed it. Put it that way.
And I've come to the conclusion that pain is just energy.
Yeah.
And when we're experiencing
It's stuck
pain,
energy.
yeah, we're
Typically,
experiencing.
it's stuck energy, and if you can move through it and past it, it stops hurting. It's stuck energy.
Oh yeah, there was one experience where I really hurt my back, and one day it was so painful in my lower back that I couldn't get up out of the bed. It was so painful. And I had this Tesla pulse magnetic field generator, and I just went online and I figured out what's the best frequency for a bad back, and I found something that gave me a frequency. So I typed it into the generator, and I put this coil right on the pain, and I turned it on, and the pain got more intense, more intense, more intense, and it was almost so intense I felt like I was going to pass out. And then suddenly it felt like it cracked, and it was the weirdest feeling. It felt like warm honey going down my legs.
Wow.
Like, that's what it felt like. It felt like warm honey going down my legs, and I'm like, the pain is completely gone. My back is totally perfect now.
Now, if Jason had told me this story 2 years ago, I would have not believed him. I would have been looking at him with a third dimensional mind, basically, and thought that everything was the way I see it normally. But having gone through this journey with him in this book and other things, and learning all about the astral world and all kinds of interesting new avenues that I'd never even thought of before, I can now honestly believe that I believe him 100% that he felt warm honey going down his legs and that this Tesla machine was doing it.
Mm.
And I think a lot of people out there probably would be like I was, very skeptical and this is just a crazy machine. It's all in, it can't be real. It's something they're just trying to sell on TV, basically, right? So, but I, it really is. There's something to this.
Empiricism is the cure for skepticism. Try it.
Yes.
And don't just try it for 5 minutes and say it doesn't work.
Yeah, I know. Well, we had things to do.
Right, we're very busy. We have to just move on.
Yeah, we had to.
I find it really interesting when people are, I've got to move on. I could talk to that part of you that's got to move on. When did it come into your life, and how has it protected your vulnerability, and what is its interest in blocking this information now?
And, I believe that the reason I am the way I am today is because I had to go through the pain I went through. I had to suffer. I had to be in very bad and dark places. And it was almost like I had to experience that side of things and then have the opposite side of, okay, what pulled me out of it? What healed me? What brought me to where I am today? And that's basically the healing journey. And the thing that I found fascinating about the healing journey is all this very strange information about our past and our future and aliens and multidimensional beings and all these different levels of experience. That was all part of the healing experience. As I healed, I got more knowledge and information from all different levels. So for me, it's not just about knowing information, it's about healing yourself so you could experience what I'm talking about.
So your book is 300 pages, and we're only at about page 61.
It's almost so you need a motion picture so that we can actually see what you're doing with the Qigong. And I can see that that's critical to really being able to go more than just read the concepts, to be able to actually experience this.
Well, I'll come visit you in Hawaii. We'll do it.
Oh, we're going to do some
I
conferences
really like
here. Indeed, yes. Come help us do these conferences. In fact, when you were talking, Bob, I was thinking, I've got such writer's block in getting my book done, and I'm presenting at the conference. Mine is The Dragon at the End of Time, and I have Jason, you and I could share it's about how I met the dragon under John Sonato, and my whole life as an experiencer. Same thing, thing. Came in conscious, remembered past lives, contacting, and this goes, I don't know how old you are, Jason. Mine goes back to 1954 when I came into this form, and probably before that. But anyway, I just had this fantasy that you and I will talk at this conference and we'll get this book out. I liked how you did it in 3 months, because I think some of us writers need a coach. Like, yeah, you can do it, a cheerleader. I love writing. You
just gotta decide you want to do it, and the way to do it these days is to self-publish. I would not recommend going to any publisher whatsoever unless you're Stephen King or somebody that's really well known, because the minute you sign with a publisher, you may get a really big fat check up front if you're well known. But after that, it can take 1 to 2 to 3 years before your book ever comes out, and by then there's so much other things that have happened to you. Whereas when we self-publish through Amazon, it's done. You press a button, and within a week, it's on ready for sale. So it's all self.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. We have 4 books that we published through Amazon. And there's like dozens more to go. We've got books that are the old format, right? So anyway, let's stay on Jason's story because it's fascinating.
Sure.
Where next? So you were Akhenaten, you met Thoth or Thoth, and you have something about spider.
Oh yeah, that's a really interesting story that I had never heard before, and I'm not sure many people have ever heard before, but it really explains why we are like we are and what is really happening on Earth.
And I've never read it on the internet, which is fantastic. I can't find it on the internet anywhere.
Yeah, it's one of the stories that I don't think Jason wanted to tell at first.
No, I was definitely fearful of my life with this story.
Yeah, but I really, the fact that he was fearful of his life, I may sound a little sick, but I wanted it even more, because being a journalist, a crime writer, I thought, well, there's got to be a juicy story here that I want to hear at least, and once I heard it, I said, oh, this has to be, this is the forbidden knowledge. That's what.
All right, let's hear it.
Sure.
How much time do we have? We have 25 minutes.
We only have like a half an hour or so. Yeah, so
okay.
We'll have you back again, I'm sure, many times. But
so he can take his time on this one.
Yeah. So I can
take your time.
So I'll set up the whole story. Is that all these experiences happen once I go to sleep. Right. So it's all in the astral or higher dimensional consciousness. And so one night I go to sleep and I get woken up by a voice in my bedroom. And the voice just says, "Do you want to know your past lives?" And, you know, it was very shocking to me because, you know, you're fast asleep and then suddenly you hear a voice in your room clear as day. So immediately I'm shooken up and I say, "No, get away." You know, that's the response, because you're shocked. You don't know what to say. So I calm down, take a couple deep breaths, and I open my eyes, and there's a being standing in my room. And this being was about, I'd say, 4 to 5 feet tall, but it was wearing a robe. So I couldn't see any details of who this person was, but it was almost like a Jedi master or something. They were wearing like this brown robe standing in my room. And I calmed down and I said, "Yes, please tell me my past lives." So this being then walked to my wall and started to write something on my wall, and I could actually see and hear like he was taking his finger and scratching it into the wall behind me. And then he came to me and he said, "Please repeat after me." So he told me this very long mantra that I had to repeat over and over again to memorize it. And then he started to tell a story. And this is how the story began, and it's just a very strange story that I had no concept at all about. And the story started off where he says, eons and eons ago, before time as we knew it, there was a race of beings, and I'll just use a name. This is not actually their name, but it's the name that we know them of, and they call them the Builders. And they said these builders, they built a spider's web that was etheric in nature, that spanned not just through this universe, but through the multiverse, through time and space, and to other dimensions. And this etheric web used a portal system where beings can travel through time and space and through dimensions to communicate with other civilizations and other beings. And I'm like, okay, this is some pretty crazy information. And then this being went on to say that another race of beings got to a very high level, and they realized that they can take control of the spider's web themselves. And these beings severed connections of many civilizations so that they can control the worlds themselves. And they went on to say that this race of beings that severed the connection to these spider webs is what we call reptilians. And that when they would sever these cords, they can then take control of entire systems for themselves. And then he went on to say that many higher beings and dimensional beings have chosen to incarnate themselves and place themselves in different times and space to reconnect these spider webs to the severed worlds, to allow the higher dimensional beings and energies to flow and manifest through. So I was basically told that I was one of these beings with this knowledge of the spider's web, and that, you know, this is like the biggest conspiracy out there, because this is the way that these worlds are severed and controlled, because they're entirely taken over at a very high level of consciousness. And, you know, I was basically told, and this is why I had fear, I was basically told that when a higher dimensional being incarnates on worlds like this, and there are many worlds like this is what people don't understand, there are many worlds like this. When we incarnate in a world like this, these beings, these reptilians, they can feel us. They know that we're here. And they will do everything in their power to make sure that we don't reach maturity. So a lot of these children get taken out quite early, in their life, either through sickness or disease or kidnapped, or, they'll just go missing, these children, because they don't want them to mature to bring those higher dimensional energies to this planet. Because these humans are basically portals to allow higher dimensional energies to flow into these worlds. And when that happens, you're allowing information in, and you're changing the environment around you, and you're changing the people around you. And that is very dangerous to do in these type of worlds. Have you heard that before?
Absolutely. Anyone in the consciousness community is threatened by the Illuminati and their agents, for sure.
Yeah. So, I was told this, and then they revealed multiple past lives where they actually showed me this taking place, where these children don't reach maturity. So it is quite shocking to experience and know these things. And that's why I kind of just held it in. And I just, I don't like talking about fearful things. Like, I don't like talking about, journeys into the future where I see destruction, or the Anunnaki, or different alien species that are here. I don't like talking about that stuff, because for me, the answer has always been healing. And it's through our...
And, it makes so much sense. Because you have already died.
Yeah.
Really. You don't fear death anymore, so they have no more blackmail power over you. And that's the same for all of us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's it. It's like, people don't understand that when I say I left my body, or I astral traveled, that's basically saying I killed myself and left my body.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's exactly what it feels like. So, I've experienced that transition countless times. And it was extremely scary the first 100 times. But after a while, you just kind of get used to the sensation. But it's a very strange sensation. It's very strange.
But this spider web...
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, this spider web concept, we're not talking 1,000 years ago. We're talking millions of years ago, right, Jason?
Well, from what I've heard, it's so long in the past that we just don't have a concept of that time scale.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And these etherical threads basically allowed every planet to communicate with each other in the astral world, basically.
Yeah, so let's say you would go to sleep at night, and instead of dreaming, you would leave your body and decide with your consciousness where you're going to travel. You'll go through the portal system, and you'll have an experience on another world or dimension, and when you're done, you come back and wake up in your physical body.
But now, because we're all basically multidimensional beings trapped in a third-dimensional world, that world is severed to most of us. And it's through raising the energy level that, as an incarnated being, that Jason hopes others will also learn how to do this, and eventually we can basically rise our frequencies and our power to overthrow anything that doesn't want us to do this anymore, and reconnect.
Actually, You're showing us the way, basically, to every time you make the contact yourself, you're bringing that consciousness into this morphogenic field. That's fantastic.
And many people are like, well, I want to be like you, or I want to have those abilities, and I can't do anything for them. The only thing I can do for them is teach them what was taught to me. Mm-hmm. So I just share the Egyptian postures, because I still believe that is what did it for me. That was the catalyst that got me through what I had to get through.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I could only...
there's a whole bunch of things that touch off the spiritual emergence phenomenon. It's different for different people, and there's many paths, but it all leads, in anthropology, we see that every culture, no matter what their entheogens or meditative practices, some people wind up ascending and able to communicate how to do it to other people. So you become an electronic shaman who's able to get out there way more than people who could just have to do face-to-face only.
Yeah, and if everybody could do this, then there would be, imagine the control that wouldn't be there among governments, religion, and everything else. So that's why they want to keep this a secret, basically.
That would be Ascension. If everybody could do this, we would be a level 1 consciousness and no longer a level Z, level 0 civilization. Yeah.
But apparently we were like that at one time, or not necessarily we in this third dimensional world in this time frame, but whoever civilization came before us, they were able to do this, and it was just the normal thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's why sometimes people call this the prison planet, I think, because unlike other planets, we can't do this. I'm sure other guests have been on and talked about how most alien species talk with telepathic communication and are able to travel through dimensions, and most of them don't even need spaceships to do it anymore. So it's just common everywhere else except here.
Well, one of the interesting things is when you do travel that way, you transcend the time-space and the artificial temporality, and you actually bend time-space, and so you change it for everybody. And these are just physical ways of saying the same thing that you were saying, Jason, about making the connection again.
Yeah, and once you make the connection, you can do that through your physical body. And you can manifest that shift in time or space, or I've seen some pretty crazy things, but what I would like to tell people that's positive about our future is that the greatest power that we have as a people is we could dream our future together, and that would actually manifest. And right now we're in chaos and we don't know how to control our minds because our minds are being controlled. But if we took our power back and took control of our energy and our mind, we can literally dream our reality and change the entire timeline in this world. And that's probably...
I love that, yeah.
That's probably the highest level of what we could accomplish, is literally dream a new world together.
Mm-hmm.
Because what Jason saw in his travels is not necessarily the future that we're all going to experience. It's a potential future, and he's been shown this to for some ways try to get people to understand that you can't live with fear. You have to live with hope and love and stuff like that, and try to project a more positive outlook on everything rather than a negative outlook.
Well, tonight, everybody, just to imagine that there's no countries, nothing to live or die for, and no religion too. Just imagine that. Go to sleep and dream that place and make it real.
It's John Lennon. That's John Lennon.
That's John Lennon. Right.
Who some people are now saying he did have a connection with something.
I really did.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And there's something very mystical about music. Mm-hmm. And when you are a musician and you play music, you are opening up so many different gateways dimensionally within you and around you. So I would definitely say that musicians are very in touch with the other side.
A lot of musicians say that they get downloads. And people say, well, how did you write that? They said, it just came to me. I just woke up, or I put my hands on the piano or on the guitar.
Moody Blues got a special tour.
They had most of their music was written through downloads.
Yes.
So fascinating.
And like Bob found out recently, what do I do before any interview or anything I do? How do I get in that mindset?
Oh yeah, he plays a guitar.
Get yourself centered.
So,
music.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Just something about playing music, it does something to the brain where it just puts you right into that channel where you know exactly what to say and when to say it. It's very strange.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. But, we're just trying to, as I said, the book seems to have hit a nerve. That's all I can say. And I'm just running into more and more people who have read the book or have heard us talk, and they say, yeah, that's exactly what we feel. You get it. You get us. And I guess we do.
I guess the deepest question for me is, does the reptilian have the ability to feel an empathetic heart? Can we merge with the reptilian instead of being at enmity? Or must we always have dualism?
We have to realize that we are the reptilian.
Yes.
Right. Yes, ultimately.
And
you come out of the illusion, you're at the top and you're looking down at this all and go, isn't this an interesting game that I and we have all co-created together?
Yes, we've all played our roles, and I know a lot of people will not like me to say this, but we've lived past lives as those reptilians that are doing these things.
Yes.
And I've actually come in contact with other races of reptilians who are highly enlightened beings. And, they've helped us a lot in our evolution. So, like I say, there's so many levels to this that it's just mind-boggling. So we really have to kind of let go everything. And in the book, I think you're almost there in those chapters where I discuss
I'm looking down.
that with these entities, even the worst experiences I've ever had, and trust me, I've had really awful things happen to me out of my body. I look at them as my greatest teachers. Because if I didn't experience that, if I didn't know what it was to feel that way or to be like that, I would never know the other side of how to not be that.
Mm-hmm.
So I learned how to protect myself, or how to navigate, or how to strengthen myself by being attacked by these beings. And I'm still here, and I'm wiser from everything. So I can't look at them and say, this is awful, this is terrible, why would they do something to me? For me, they were my greatest teachers.
It's such a parallel to Jesus suffering before the Transfiguration.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it happens to each individual shaman.
I don't know anything about religion, and I have to say that truthfully, because I just try to keep my experience is pure, and I haven't really dabbled too much in anything else.
They're universal. Everybody has that kind of archetype going within them.
I agree. I definitely agree. And that's why, and the thing that's very dangerous that I found recently is there's so many people out there right now that are, they're believing in a savior to come to them and save the world, or even aliens, come down and take us off planet and rescue us. And that's so counter to what the teachings that I've been given, that this whole experience is done purposely so we learn how to take our own power back and be responsible for what we carry.
We are the Messiah.
Yeah, we
have
to save ourselves, basically.
Right.
And that doesn't mean there's not a higher...
by becoming conscious.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And I always like to tell people that we're not being anti-religious here, or anti-faith, because every religion has their faith, and every religion has their creator, basically. It's just that there is a higher source out there controlling everything, but we have the power to connect with this higher source, and that's all part of the plan.
And we're never separate from this source.
Yeah. Part of the problem is that religion over the years has said that if you don't obey these laws and these laws, then you'll go to hell, so it keeps everybody in check. If everybody knew that they had the power to heal themselves and to ascend themselves eventually, then there would be no need for laws or anything like that. So in some ways, I can understand why people have gone along with this big charade for thousands of years, but it doesn't mean that there's not a higher source controlling everything. It's the same higher source that controls us also controls the entities and the aliens. So they all believe in something else too. So
it's all built into our physiology. Our brainstem is reptilian. It's concerned with regulating the body and hierarchy and greed, and that's overlaid by an emotional limbic system, which is our empathetic system, and above that we have an intellectual system, an intuitive system, and the pineal is a spiritual system. So we have all these. When you transcend a level of consciousness, when you transcend the body level or the material level, it's not gone. It's just subsumed in a more inclusive concept of self until ultimately you identify with source. But that doesn't mean that you can't disidentify temporarily and take care of things at any level, in my opinion.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like many people have faith, and faith is extremely important. And then you have people that experience the divine, and then you have something called knowing. So it's you've experienced, you know these laws as truth. I don't need to have faith in them because I know what the process is.
So, Jason, it says in your book that you did an ayahuasca journey, and Dr. Lesson studied with Stan Groff and facilitated over thousands of people that have done different type of shamanic journey work using entheogens and sacred medicine. You want to tell us a little bit about what entities, what beings did you encounter, and what did you learn?
Well, I was, I don't even want to say beings because I was just engulfed in light. In fact, when I would close my eyes, it was so bright that I had to open them just to be cognitive, because in that state, it was almost too easy to leave your body. So just with a thought form, I would be gone. And what I found interesting about the experience that I did in the jungle is the shaman wanted us to lay with our backs on the earth. So for the first, I would say, hour of the ceremony, we weren't even allowed to move or get up, because they said that the connection to the earth, the energy of the earth, had to connect right to the base of the spine and flow right to the skull. So we had to be right on the earth. And what I found interesting is that in this state, or even in Peru, there's a lot of sacred sites there, I felt like the physical body had anchor points on the earth. And what I mean is that if there's a sacred point on the earth, if I would step on that sacred spot, my body would actually shut off and my spirit would be released. So it was almost like there was these dimensional portals or gateways that were activated in Peru. They're still active. And they just threw me out of my body. And what I found with the ayahuasca is that I got this real sense that the physical body is not mine, that the physical body is the earth itself, and the earth and the body are one being. And in this state, I could literally let go of my body, and I knew my body would be protected and cared for because I plugged it into the earth. It's like a Tesla car being plugged into the electrical plug to get recharged, right? So the driver of the electric car, which is the spirit of Jason, said, okay, Earth, take care of my body. I'm going to put it in stasis. So I'm going to put my body in stasis in this state of consciousness, and I'm going to go travel the ethers for a while. And then
far out.
That's exactly what I felt. That was just the knowing of being in that state. But for me, it was a very physical thing. You know, everybody has spiritual experiences. For me, it was very physical. I felt like the ayahuasca spirit was going to every part of my body. And if there was a problem there or a toxin or something that was not right, it would release it or work with it. So it was a good thing I was checked into a very nice hotel right at the edge of the jungle with a great washroom, because I don't think I left the washroom for 2 or 3 days after. So it was a very physical release as well as spiritual.
You know what? It's really interesting. What Levitsky's experiments show that If you wanted to access that again, all you have to do is go in your mind back to that room and take some imaginary ayahuasca, and you can go back there and explore more, just as an act of conscious re-identification with the journey.
Well, I'll let you in on a secret here, is that when I came back to Toronto, anything that was bad for me, let's say like a coffee or alcohol, if I were to do any of that, I would instantly be back in ayahuasca territory.
Wow.
And it was like, I'll take a sip of alcohol and it's like I can't keep myself in my body. And I'm like, it just like made me allergic to anything that was bad to me, or it made me super sensitive to it. So if someone's like smoking a joint outside and I walk by and I can smell it, it's hard for me to stay in my body. So it's like
Well, that's good to know.
So I got to be so careful. I got to be so like clean almost, because that's what the ayahuasca did to me. It changed something in me where I just became so utterly sensitive to these type of stimuli.
What about you, Bob? Have you ever done ayahuasca?
No, I have never done ayahuasca. It's something I've been very fascinated with, but every time I hear somebody telling me that they've done ayahuasca, it always sounds like, while the experience is incredible, the after effects are something you wouldn't want to have happen to you. Like I don't. I mean, if I'm in the jungle in Peru, the last thing I want to be is in an outhouse for 3 days, puking my guts out.
Right.
So
right.
so that part, you got to figure out a way you can change that. If you can change that, then I'm all in for it.
I know, but it's about the experience and the intent.
You bond with your fellow beings.
Yes. Well, there's some. I mean, there's some experiences I want to experience. Yeah, it's being in an outhouse. I don't know if that's. I mean, to me, roughing it is I'm close to an all-night drugstore or an all-night coffee shop.
That's roughing it. So, you had something you wanted to say.
Oh, you just it's a purgative, and as you throw up, or poop your pants, what you should do is think about what you want to get out, and let that be a symbolic act that will take you to all kinds of learning. In my opinion, that's a good way to go with it.
And then you'll be very
You'll be very humble, yes. We have like 6 minutes left. What would you like to cover? I'm going to sneeze. Oh, go ahead. I'm going to sneeze.
Bob, do you want to go or say anything or bring up a topic or?
Well, I mean, we didn't even touch on Atlantis, but I don't.
Oh, touch now.
Yeah, Atlantis comes up, so we have 4 minutes to talk about Atlantis. Go for it.
All right. I'll make it very easy. I do remember a couple of past lives there, and I also received a story of the creation of Atlantis, which I thought was a very interesting story that I've never heard before. And I guess I'll start there. I heard that there were beings from another world, and they decided to come to Earth. Now these beings lived on a planet that had more water than Earth. So it was like a water world, and their physiology actually had more dense water in the physical body. So these beings actually came to this planet through a portal in the Atlantic Ocean. So a bunch of them actually came through this portal in the Atlantic Ocean, and they were almost like half man, half fish. And they could actually survive entirely underwater. They don't have to come out of the water. And eventually what they did was they came to shore and started to interact with what we would call the Earth humans at the time. And they actually moved on the mainland and married in to the tribal communities. And eventually they decided to move out and create this island city, which what we would call Atlantis. And what I heard about Atlantis was it wasn't just one city. that Atlantis would be like what the ancients would call Earth. So if you go back far enough, instead of it being called Earth, it was called Atlantis. And there were all outposts of Atlantis on many places around the planet. It wasn't just one island. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of initiations and rites with the original Atlanteans, and it was all about going back to the water, because they believed that if they could sustain themselves and do initiations to like hold their breath and sustain themselves underwater, then they're reactivating this ancient genetics of the original Atlanteans, to then they can go back into the portal in the sea and travel back to their home world. But now let's move thousands of years into their future, where they've now, they've completely assimilated. They've kind of lost that DNA in the Earth population, and they're very high technologically advanced and have many outposts and cities. And they also have connections to what we would call star nations. So they've had treaties and connections and contact with beings such as beings from Orion, Sirius, Pleiades, Arcturian, and a couple others in the, where is that one? Anyway, so there's many different star nations that were actually in communication and trade with the original Atlanteans, and they became very warring with their technology and power. And a lot of these star nations just went away, like the Arcturians just broke off their connection with the Atlanteans. They didn't want anything to do with them anymore. And the Pleiadians tried to help. They tried to solve these problems and teach them what they can do to heal, and I think that's what's happening right now on the planet too. But eventually, the Atlanteans just wanted more technology and more war, and they became very connected to different groups in Orion and Sirius, and they basically destroyed themselves. They had great weapons. They knew how to modify the weather, and they controlled the climate so much that the Earth became so unstable that everything erupted, earthquakes, tidal waves, and it just wiped them all out. So that's the quick story of Atlantis in a couple minutes.
Wow.
And of course, the original Atlanteans that he says the human population, they actually weren't Earthlings. They were from another planet too, right, Jason?
Oh, well, I would call Earth the
refugee planet.
The refugee planet.
We have 1 minute left. You might want to cover
okay.
how people can reach you and your websites.
Okay.
Sure.
Well, the book is on Amazon.com in the States and Amazon.ca in Canada. You can also link up the book through Jason's website and my website. Jason's website is thecrystalsun.com, and my website is bobmitchellauthor.simplesite.com. And Jason and I are actually going to be talking about the Spider's Web at this summer's Alien Cosmic Expo in Brantford, which I believe you two people are going to be there too.
We will be there too. Yes, we're all going to be there.
We'll all meet up there for a little soda pop, and Jason's off to Japan in a few weeks to give a tour, and so he's.
And we're out of time.
All right, thank you
love
so
and blessings.
Much.
Aloha. Thank you so much, Bob and Jason. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in.
Bye bye.
Aloha.